So, Mr. Neufeld, if you're eliminating vouching, which they plan to do, you're introducing partisanship into the voting system. What's going on here?
I don't know, but it's certainly not up to international standards of election legal frameworks.
And what's the consequence of introducing more partisanship into the electoral process?
It's an unlevel playing field. It makes people wonder whether this process is really being administered in a completely neutral way.
In terms of international standards then, how would we compare to countries we've often advised on elections?
Until now, we've done really well.
But going forward, if this bill passes, should anyone take us seriously abroad when we go and say this is how you should run it?
It's going to be more difficult.
And I was going to ask you about Mr. O'Toole as well, pulling out all his ID out of his wallet. What did you make of that incident?
I can pull all my ID out too, but if I put my driver's license aside, I don't have anything that proves my address.
Mr. Neufeld, just to be clear on the 400,000 number with the VICs, are you saying that's the number that used the VIC for
the VIC
ID
for address identification,
as opposed to the 3 target groups that Elections Canada approved the VIC as address?
Now, within those 3 target groups, 400,000 people used the VIC card to prove their address identification.
So, Mr. Neufeld, you've made it pretty clear today that they're misquoting you. There's no mystery here anymore. So if Pierre Poilievre stands up in the House and continues to do this, what recourse do you have? I mean, could you sue him? Could you, he's using your name all over the country to back up his changes to the Elections Act.
I think all I can do is keep talking to people like you.
He says that he's interested in your facts, not your opinions.
The facts that I gathered in doing that compliance review.
Right now in Quebec, there's a serious issue where students are being turned away at the polls, basically being told that they don't meet certain requirements to vote, and now we're looking at this bill. Do you think we're on the verge of some serious charter challenges to Canadian election legislation?
My experience in 33 years in this business is when you deny somebody the vote and they don't think there's a justified reason for it, they get really, really angry. And sometimes they're quite willing to take it to the courts.
And do you think, with C-23, that it meets the charter challenge?
I think if it goes through as it's written currently, there will certainly be some court cases where the charter rights are put into question.
Given the nature of the questioning you heard today from the government about vouching, do you have any hope that they will actually put it back in or amend it in any way?
You guys watch this all the time. I don't
Well,
do
what
this
do you
as
think?
closely as
You were listening to me. You were listening
I'm
to
hopeful, but I tend to be an optimist that they listen carefully and that they will make some amendments.
Can we go back to Vic? Just in the committee, you actually used the words. There's a huge number of errors with vouching, but just to be clear, these are administrative errors. These are not problem errors, right? Because I could see this clip being played over and over again in campaign literature.
Yes, absolutely. There were a huge number of errors with vouching, a huge number of errors with registration at the time of voting, but they were administrative in nature. They were not fraudulent.
And they didn't meet the test of changing results of elections.
Not at all. And the Supreme Court and the Ontario Superior Court completely underlined that in their judgments.
And you're saying they were due largely to the complex rules that are sort of foisted upon the people that are hired for one day to do these processes.
You should try it sometime. Become an election official, be subjected to 2.5 or 3 hours of training, and learn off by heart 17 exception procedures and memorize a 100-page manual. And then on your first day of work, do a perfect job. It's impossible. The system needs to be redesigned. It's just antiquated.
The Conservatives did quote you as saying it would be very difficult to fix. Were they selectively quoting you again?
Difficult to fix unless you do the things that I suggested, which included changing the legislation, included doing the administrative changes that I suggested, and ultimately changing the system so that you have a small cadre of people at each voting place dealing with these exception procedures, and the 85 to 90% of the people going through express lane where there's very little. I mean, if you got your ID and you got your VIC card, you're on the voters list, it's pretty straightforward. And those people should be able to be processed very quickly.
So like in hockey have special teams that deal with just the exceptional
Yeah,
cases?
it's like going to the grocery store, you know, full service or quick checkout.
Do you think that if in your report you recommend the New Brunswick model and possibly looking at digitizing the system, if we digitize the system or had some sort of online voter tracking software, would that eliminate all these issues that you saw in this process?
The digitization of elections is not a panacea, but a lot of the things that I suggest in my report definitely would help to improve the compliance levels considerably.
Can I just ask you just to go back to one of my questions, because I'm still a little confused about this. You can't use the VIC card, you can't vouch, and they're introducing partisanship into the electoral process. So if it looks like a duck and quacks like a duck, what is it?
It might be a duck.
So what is this duck about?
What's the name of the dog?
What do you think is going on?
What would be the goal of doing all these, whether that is the result or not? What would be the goal of someone doing this?
You'd have to ask the minister. I'm not sure
But you
what
know
his
the
motivation
system.
is.
What would be the goal? What would be the end result when you do all this?
I think a lot of court challenges.
If you saw this bill in another country that perhaps didn't have the reputation of Canada, what would you think the people writing that bill were trying to do?
To me, it appears like they're trying to tilt the playing field in one direction.
Which direction?
Their direction.
Can we go back to Vic, just to make sure everybody was able to use Vic before? It was allowed to everybody?
No.
Okay, can you explain that to me?
The requirement for having identification before you vote only came in 2007. The VIC was not on the list of acceptable identity documents. The last election, in some by-elections before the last elections and at the last general election, he allowed it to be used in student residences.
Okay, that's it.
That's it. And it's on the Elections Canada website.
Yeah.
If you look under the whole identification,
So people
there's a piece
who would
about
have had problems to have an address, a document with address.
these were identified as people that had the most problems.
Okay.
And 400,000 people apparently used it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.